On the way home after picking up my granddaughter from school, 7-year-old Clara grabbed my hand tightly. "Grandma, quick, let's go in the bathroom." She pulled me into a room and locked the door. I asked her, "What is happening?" She whispered. "Shh, don't say anything. Look, Grandma." Then she crouched down and looked through the crack under the door. I followed her gaze, and I froze in fear. But before we continue, check if you are subscribed to the Elderly Stories channel and share in the comments where you are watching us from. We would love to know how far our stories reach. At sunset in Key West, my granddaughter Clara, 7 years old, and I were walking home from school. I had bought her a cherry popsicle red like the bougainvillea flowers in the downtown square. Clara licked the popsicle, and her innocent smile filled my heart with warmth. But when we passed an alley that led to Mariner's Beach, everything changed. Clara stopped dead. The popsicle fell to the ground, melting in a red stain on the sidewalk. I bent down, alarmed, and asked, "Clara, what's wrong, sweetheart? What is it?" But she didn't answer. Her big eyes went wide, staring at an invisible point behind me. Her face turned pale, her lips tight, and before I could understand what was happening, she squeezed my hand hard, her little nails digging into my skin. "Grandma, quick!" Her voice was trembling, almost begging. I didn't have time to ask more before Clara pulled me into a run. The strength of a terrified 7-year-old was impressive. I stumbled trying to keep up as my heart began to pound. We crossed the crowded street, but the sound of traffic faded in my mind. Clara dragged me to some nearby public restrooms, but she didn't stop at the normal stalls. She ran to the end of the hall where there was an old door leading to a janitor's closet. The dry click of the lock sounded like a warning. Inside, the space was so narrow I could hear my own breathing. The smell of chemicals burned my nose and darkness enveloped us, except for a thin sliver of light filtering under the door. Clara trembled in my arms, her small body pressed against mine, seeking refuge. She covered her mouth with her hands, trying to muffle her sobs. I held her tight, feeling her racing heart against my chest. "Clara, what is it? Tell me, honey," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, although an unexplainable anxiety tightened my chest. She didn't answer right away. Instead, "Look, Grandma." Her voice was barely a thread trembling, as if speaking louder might summon something terrible. I crouched down and squinted to look through the crack. At first I only saw the dirty floor and blurry shadows, but then bright red high-heeled shoes appeared before me like two burning embers in the middle of the gray. They moved slowly, step by step, firm and deliberate. The sound of the heels, click-clack, echoed on the floor, each strike like a hammer on my chest. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid Clara could hear it. I recognized those shoes. They belonged to Lucy, my daughter-in-law, the same ones she had worn to my son Charles's birthday party last week. Clara hid her face in my skirt, her little body rigid like a trapped bird. Through the crack I saw the shoes stop in front of the first stall. A dull thud sounded as the door opened, then another as it closed. Then she moved to the second, the third. The bumps continued rhythmic cold. She was checking them one by one, like a hunter searching for her prey. My heart clenched. I didn't understand what was happening, but Clara's terrified look and the presence of those red heels told me this was no coincidence. Suddenly, a voice rang out, sweet but chilling. "Clara, sweetheart, are you in here?" It was Lucy's voice. I had heard it hundreds of times. When she called Clara for dinner, when she laughed with customers at the bakery, when she spoke tenderly to Charles. Clara shuddered in my arms, hugging me tighter as if she wanted to disappear inside me. I stroked her hair, trying to calm her, but I was trembling too. The footsteps approached until they were right in front of the closet door where we were hiding. The shadow of the heels cast itself under the door, covering the thin line of light, our only connection to the outside world. I held my breath, feeling the air in my lungs run out. The footsteps stopped. Silence. A thick, terrifying silence, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to explode. Suddenly a phone ringing broke the quiet with a sharp sound. I heard Lucy mutter something in annoyance. The heels sounded again, moving away toward the exit. The click-clack grew fainter until it disappeared. Even so, I didn't dare to breathe deeply, fearing it was a trap. Clara was still clinging to me, her body shaking. And in the midst of that tremor, I couldn't help but remember the days when it all began. I am Elizabeth Torres. I am 62 years old, and I am a widow. I live in Key West, where the sound of the waves and the smell of toasted bread mark the rhythm of life. The bakery, Seaside Bakery, hidden in the old town, is not just my workplace, but also my heart's home. Every morning before the sun rises, I get up, and with my hands rough from flour and years, I begin to knead and bake fresh donuts and rolls. This bakery is all I have the place where I raised my only son, Charles, alone. After my husband died in a storm at sea almost 3 decades ago, Charles was always a quiet, kind young man. Since he was little, he would run around the bakery, help me clean the tables, arrange the bread on the shelves, or carry the heavy sacks of flour. He wasn't like the other boys in Key West, who preferred to spend their time on the beach drinking beer and laughing loudly. He preferred to stay in the bakery reading or fixing the old oven. And then Lucy Ramirez appeared like a fresh breeze that entered our lives. She was a regular customer, a young architect who had just moved from Miami. Lucy always came in smiling, her shiny black hair pulled back in a high ponytail and her eyes sparkling like the sun's reflection on the sea. "Mrs. Elizabeth, your bread is the best in the city," she used to say with a voice as sweet as honey. I would smile and tell her she was exaggerating, but inside I felt comforted. Lucy had this way of making others feel seen, valued. And I noticed her eyes shone even brighter when she spoke with Charles. Charles, who had always been reserved and shy, began to change. He laughed more. He even shaved more carefully on the days he knew Lucy would stop by the bakery. I saw him in front of the mirror adjusting his shirt, and I knew his heart had awakened. A year later, they got married. The wedding was held on the beach, simple but warm. I stood there amidst the sound of the waves and the laughter with tears falling silently. Not from sadness, but from happiness. I thought that at last Charles had found his partner and that our little family was complete. Lucy brought Clara with her, her 7-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. The girl's father, James, had died in an accident. She mentioned it only once, and I didn't want to ask for more. Clara was a beautiful child with big round eyes and slightly curly hair. The first time she saw me, she handed me a drawing of a red hibiscus flower. "This is for you, Grandma," she murmured, her cheeks blushing. My heart melted. From then on, I loved her like a granddaughter, always keeping a small donut in my pocket to make her smile. At first, our life seemed like a dream. Lucy was a perfect wife. She cooked delicious meals. The smell of her famous chili filled the entire apartment above the bakery. She redecorated the house, changed the curtains, put plants on the balcony, and transformed my little kitchen into a tidy, bright space. But I gave one to Clara, smiling. "This is for you." But Lucy, who was in the kitchen, took the donut from the girl's hands and replaced it with a plate of perfectly cut fruit. "Too much sugar isn't good for her, Mom," she said in a soft but firm voice. Clara lowered her head without saying anything, though her eyes looked at me as if asking for forgiveness. I started to notice Clara's gaze. She watched her mother not with affection, but with a strange caution, as if she was afraid of doing something wrong. One night during dinner, Clara accidentally spilled a glass of sweet tea. The glass shattered on the floor, and the girl turned pale, her hands trembling. Sorry, Mom," she stammered as she picked up the pieces. Lucy didn't scold her. She just smiled. "It's okay, honey." Clara cleaned up in silence, her head down, as if she feared being punished for a simple mistake. On another occasion, I sewed a rag doll for Clara. When I gave it to her, her eyes lit up, and she hugged it tightly. "She's beautiful, Grandma," she whispered. But a few days later, while cleaning her room, I found the doll hidden under the bed, as if she was afraid someone would discover it. My suspicions turned into a dark cloud one afternoon when I returned home earlier because I had forgotten my scarf. I went up the stairs slowly, not wanting to interrupt anyone. As I passed Clara's room, I heard Lucy's voice, icy. "What did I promise you, huh? Never lie to me. I know everything." There was no sweetness, not a trace of tenderness. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. I pushed the door open, trying to seem calm. "I'm home," I said, my voice trembling. Lucy turned immediately. Her perfect smile returned as if she had flipped a switch. Mom's home. Clara and I were just playing telling stories," she said in a friendly tone as if nothing had happened. But Clara took a step back, and her eyes looked at me pleadingly, begging me not to leave. I returned the smile, but inside, I knew Lucy's was just a mask. Behind it, something was wrong, and now after the sound of Lucy's heels faded into the distance, the small cleaning closet. I waited 2 more minutes, my ear listening for any noise. Outside, I only heard the murmur of the waves mixed with the distant shouts of someone selling cold sodas. There were no more footsteps nor Lucy's sweet, terrifying voice. I opened the door carefully, just enough to let in a sliver of light. Through the crack, I saw the bathroom was completely empty. I helped Clara out. Her legs were so weak that she was practically leaning entirely on me to walk. As we left that suffocating space and breathed in the salty sea air, I thought I would feel relief, but I didn't. Clara began to shake uncontrollably, as if the fear she had held in for so long had finally broken free. I led her to a stone bench under a sea almond tree overlooking Mariners Beach. I bought a bottle of water from a nearby street vendor, gave it to her, and spoke gently. "Take a sip, honey, then tell Grandma what happened." Clara held the bottle tightly, but she didn't drink. She just shook her head, hugging herself, as if trying to become invisible. I sat next to her, put my hand on her shoulder, and tried to keep my voice calm. "It's okay, Clara. It's just you and me here. You can tell me anything." But she remained silent, her big eyes filled with tears, staring at her sandy sandals. Then, like a dam breaking, Clara burst into tears. She sobbed. She threw herself into my arms, hiding her face in my chest, as her tears soaked my blouse. "I'm so scared, Grandma," she sobbed in a tiny, broken voice. Mommy is following me." Those words pierced my heart like a knife. I hugged Clara tightly, trying to contain the anger that was beginning to boil inside me. "Clara, tell me, what does your mom do that scares you so much?" I asked, my voice trembling, though I tried to stay calm. Clara took a deep breath, trying to control her sobs. Then she began to speak in short sentences, fragmented but full of truth. "Mommy doesn't just wait for me at the school gate," she said, looking out at the sea. "Sometimes she sits in the cafe across from the bathroom. Sometimes she asks my friend Matthew what I ate or what I played with. I don't want her to know, but she always knows." I listened, feeling my heart shrink. Clara continued speaking, her voice growing more frail. "Yesterday, Matthew told me a really pretty lady asked him about me, and he described her just like Mommy Grandma. She was wearing her blue blouse and the red shoes." Clara paused, hugging me tighter. "Mommy said if I told anyone, even Daddy Charles or you, she would be very sad, that she would have to take me somewhere far, far away." Her words left me frozen. I held her tighter as rage and sadness mixed in my chest. Rage that Lucy had made this child live in fear. "I won't let your mom take you anywhere," I whispered firmly, though my mind was filled with questions. What was Lucy hiding? Why was she controlling Clara so much? On the way to the bakery, I didn't let go of Clara's hand for a second. Her small hands were ice cold, even though the afternoon was still warm. I looked around, constantly watching every car that passed, especially the white ones like the one Lucy used to drive. Every engine noise, every shadow that moved made me jump. The sunset in Key West used to be beautiful, with the sky painted orange and red like a promise of peace. But that afternoon, those colors only seemed like a warning. Something was about to change. That night, after Clara was asleep, I waited for Charles to return from delivering cakes to a hotel near the beach. When he came in, I saw a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "We had a lot of customers today, Mom," he said, taking off his flour-dusted shoes and dropping onto the sofa. I nodded, forcing a smile. I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I had to tell him what happened this afternoon. "Charles, I need to talk to you," I began carefully. He looked up, curious but calm. I took a deep breath and told him everything. How Clara had dragged me into the janitor's closet, the terrified look in her eyes, Lucy's red heels, and the girl's trembling words about her mother following her. I told him how Clara shook her phrases about Lucy always knowing everything and that she would be taken away if she dared to tell anyone. Charles listened, but his expression slowly changed, from concern to doubt, and finally to slight annoyance. When I finished speaking, he sighed, put a hand on my shoulder and said in a low but firm voice, "Mom, you're overthinking this. Lucy is just very worried about Clara. You know how she lost James. She's afraid of losing her daughter too, of not being able to protect her." His words fell on me like a bucket of cold water. I looked him in the eyes, searching for some empathy, but I only found defensiveness. The girl was so scared she dropped her popsicle. She was shaking in my arms. That's not normal worry. Just then, the bedroom door opened. Lucy came out dressed in cream-colored silk pajamas, her black hair loose over her shoulders. She stood there silent, her eyes wide as if she had heard everything. My heart sank. I didn't know how long she had been standing there, but her look, not angry, not defensive, but full of tears, took me by surprise. She approached Charles, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to scare Clara." She hung her head, wringing her hands. "It's just that since James, I'm so afraid of losing her, of not being a good mother." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with pain. "I just want to do it right, Mom. I'm afraid of failing." Her words, her fragile tone, they made me hesitate. For a moment, I almost wanted to believe her. But the image of Clara trembling in the closet, her eyes filled with terror, returned to my mind, and I knew I couldn't let myself be swayed by pity. However, Charles was already on her side. He stood up, hugged Lucy, and patted her back as if comforting a child. "It's okay, honey," he whispered. Then he looked at me with a hint of reproach in his eyes. "Mom, I know you're worried about Clara, but Lucy only wants what's best for her." I just stood there motionless, and the conversation ended. A few days later during breakfast, Lucy announced she had hired a company to install a security system in the bakery and the apartment. "It's to prevent break-ins and keep the family safe," she said with a kind but calculated smile. I nodded without saying anything, but an uneasiness began to grow inside me. One afternoon, while cleaning the bread shelves, I discovered a tiny camera, almost invisible, placed in the corner of the living room, pointing directly at the common area. Another was in the hallway, where Clara and I used to play. The little red light that blinked was like an empty eye. Lucy's control became more and more subtle. One day she placed a leather-bound notebook on the table, filled with pages written in neat handwriting. "This is the family schedule," she announced enthusiastically. "I think it will help us be more organized and united." In that notebook she had written down everything: the time I went to the market, the time Charles made deliveries, the time Clara went to her ballet classes. She had even noted when I usually took my nap and what time I checked the oven. "Lucy, don't you think this is a bit much?" I tried to tell her, but she just smiled. "Oh, Mom, it's just more practical this way. I just want everything to be clear." One afternoon, I was 10 minutes late. When we entered the house, Lucy was already at the door, her arms crossed, her perfect smile in place. "Is everything all right, Mom?" she asked, her voice sweet, but without warmth. "I called the teacher and she said you hadn't arrived yet. I got worried." I tried to stay calm and explained that the oven had broken down, but her gaze never left me, evaluating every word I said. Clara hid behind me, not daring to look up. My house no longer felt like a home, but a stage, and Lucy was the director. Every gesture, every word was under observation. I began to notice little details: how she always wiped the fingerprints off the doorknobs as if trying to erase any trace of error, how she organized the spice jars in alphabetical order without a single deviation. Her perfection was no longer admirable. It was a silent weapon, a constant warning that I had to be careful, that Clara had to be careful. That night, around 2 a.m, the neighborhood was completely silent. The only sounds were the distant rhythm of the waves and the hum of the ceiling fan, turning slowly with a faint ticking. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep. The image of Clara's terrified eyes in that public restroom, Lucy's fake smile, and the cameras blinking in the dark wouldn't leave me alone. Unable to stand it anymore, I sat up in bed, my bare feet touching the cold floor. I decided to go down to the kitchen for a glass of water, hoping something so simple would calm me. The hallway was dark, lit only by the weak moonlight filtering through the window, drawing shadows on the wall. As I passed the main bathroom, a sharp crash froze my blood. Crash. It was the sound of something breaking with a force that was not accidental. It wasn't the sound of a cup falling. A yellowish light filtered through the crack, spilling onto the tiles like a dangerous invitation. Inside, I heard agitated, ragged breathing, like someone who had just run a long distance. I took a deep breath, trying to make my own breathing as quiet as possible, and moved forward carefully. My trembling hand touched the door, and I pushed it open slowly, just enough to look inside. Lucy was standing with her back to me in front of the large wall mirror. The white fluorescent light cast a long, distorted shadow on the floor. In the white porcelain sink, fragments of a hand mirror glittered like tiny abandoned diamonds. A few drops of dark blood fell from her right hand, spreading across the porcelain like abstract stains on a disturbing painting. Lucy didn't seem to notice the wound. She remained motionless, her eyes wide open, staring at her reflection in the large mirror. That gaze was empty, lifeless, as if she were talking to an unknown version of herself. Then she began to mutter in a voice so low I had to strain to hear, "It wasn't my fault. I told you it wasn't my fault." Her voice trembled, as if trying to convince someone or convince herself. She held her head with her uninjured hand. Her body swayed slightly, as if she were trapped in a delirium. I stood still, my heart beating so hard I feared she could hear it. Suddenly her voice became clearer, more desperate. "It was him who fell. He slipped. I just pushed his hand away." Those words chilled me. I felt a coldness run through my body, as if someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. Him, who was she talking about? In my mind, the image of James Lucy's ex-husband appeared. But no, it couldn't be. The report said it was an accident. Or was there something I didn't know, fear and doubt mixed inside me, making me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff? Unable to stop myself, I asked in a trembling voice, "Lucy, who are you talking about?" My voice broke the silence, and Lucy jumped. She spun around, her eyes turning from empty to completely terrified when she saw me. For a second, I saw pure panic in her gaze, like a cornered animal. But then she blinked, and a forced, twisted smile appeared on her lips. "Mom, you scared me," she said, trying to sound calm, but her voice sounded strange, dry in the silence. "I just had a nightmare, a horrible dream." Lucy quickly wrapped her bleeding hand in a towel, avoiding my gaze. She hurried past me, muttering over and over, "It was just a dream, Mom." But I knew it wasn't a dream. The way she had said, "he fell," was not that of someone who had just woken up scared. It was the voice of someone trying to convince herself of a lie, someone hiding a terrible truth. That same night, I decided I couldn't stand by. I had to find out who he was. The next morning, as the dawn was just beginning to light the sky, I was already in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in my hands. When Charles and Lucy came down for breakfast, I tried to maintain a calm tone and told them I had to visit a sick cousin in a small town up the coast and would probably be back late. Lucy smiled and nodded. "Take care, Mom. If you need anything, call me." Her smile, as always, perfect but cold. Charles just looked up from the newspaper to nod. In reality, I didn't go up the coast. I went directly to a small cafe in the historic district where the cobblestone streets and blooming bougainvillea created a peaceful air far from Lucy's control. I chose a secluded corner where none of her cameras could see me. There I met Robert, my late husband's best friend, a retired police chief from Miami. He was a man I trusted completely, someone who had shared nights of tequila and conversations about the sea with my husband under the moonlight. Robert sat across from me. His wrinkled face showed his years, but his eyes were still as sharp as when he was working. I told him everything. Clara's terrified eyes, the red heels in the public restroom, the chilling scene in the bathroom the night before. I handed him an envelope with some dollars, not much, but enough to ask him to use his experience to investigate Lucy Ramirez and her ex-husband James. I stayed afterward in the nearby square pretending to read an old book, though my eyes couldn't leave my phone. Every sound, every notification, every bus engine that passed made my heart race. A few hours later, the phone vibrated. It was Robert. His voice sounded grave firm. "Elizabeth, I found him. James Mendoza. Died 2 years ago. His last address was in Coral Gables in a middle-class neighborhood. The official report says, domestic accident, fall down the stairs. Too quick." Then he sent me an address by text, along with a warning. "Be careful, Elizabeth. Something isn't right." Those words left a weight in my chest, as if I had just touched a cold secret. Without a second thought, I took the first bus to Miami. The trip lasted several hours. The landscape outside the window changed from green palm trees by the sea to the arid hills of the highlands. I leaned back in the seat, my hands clutching my old cloth bag, while a single question spun in my head. What really happened on those stairs? The image of Lucy in front of the mirror muttering "he fell," replayed over and over like a stuck movie. I tried to imagine James, the man Lucy almost never talked about, beyond mentioning he died in an accident. But the panic in her voice the night before the blood in the sink and Clara's terrified gaze all told me this was something much more terrible than a simple accident. When I arrived in Coral Gables, I looked for the address Robert had sent me. It was a 2-story house painted light blue with a white fence and small pots of cacti in the front garden. But another family lived there now, a young couple with children whose laughter could be heard from the windows. I stood in front of the gate feeling lost and confused. What should I do? Knock on the door and ask about someone who lived there 2 years ago. I was about to leave when an older woman watering some bougainvillea at the house next door looked at me curiously. She was wearing a faded floral dress and had her white hair pulled back in a low bun. Gathering my courage, I approached her and said I was a distant relative of Lucy's family. "I just want to know a little more about her old life," I said, trying to sound natural, though my heart was pounding. The woman, whose name was Ellen, watched me for a moment, as if trying to decide if she could trust me. Then she smiled. She invited me into her patio and offered me a glass of fresh lemonade. "Sit down, dear." After a few minutes of light chat about the weather and the neighborhood, she began to talk. "Lucy? Yes, a very pretty girl, but she always seemed tense," said Mrs. Ellen, lowering her voice as if afraid someone might hear. "Her husband James was a good man, always brought sweet bread for the neighborhood kids and smiled all the time. She told me their life looked perfect from the outside. A nice house, Clara always well-dressed, and Lucy taking care of every detail. But the walls were thin," she said, "and I often heard them arguing." "Lucy was obsessed with being a perfect mother," Mrs. Ellen said, staring into the distance. "She controlled everything about Clara. The food, the clothes, even her friends. Once I saw her standing across from the school, just watching the girl play from afar, without blinking." Then she paused, looking around as if afraid someone was listening. "The night he died." She lowered her voice even more, almost to a whisper. "They argued very loudly. The whole neighborhood heard them. James was yelling that he couldn't take it anymore, that she was not right in the head, and that he was going to file for divorce to get custody of Clara." My throat felt dry, and I gripped the lemonade glass tightly. Mrs. Ellen continued. "James had spoken to my son, who is a lawyer, about gathering proof that Lucy was unfit to care for her daughter. He was afraid she would do something inappropriate. After the yelling, there was a very loud crash," she recounted, and her eyes darkened. And then silence, a horrible silence. The next morning the police came. They said it was an accident, that James fell down the stairs, but—" She paused, looking directly at me. "Nobody believed it was an accident, ma'am, but nobody dared to say anything. The look in Lucy's eyes after that, it was scary." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, as if a gust of icy wind had cut through the afternoon heat. I thanked Mrs. Ellen, my hands trembling as I set the glass on the table. On the bus back to Key West, I stared out the window without really seeing anything, just images. Mrs. Ellen's words, Lucy's terrified whispers in the bathroom, and Clara's frightened eyes all intertwined, forming a horrifying picture. I returned to Key West as the sky was already beginning to darken. As I entered the living room, I saw Lucy sitting on the sofa reading a story to Clara. The warm light of the lamp enveloped them like a perfect painting of mother and daughter. Clara was snuggled against her, her big eyes fixed on the book. Lucy looked up and smiled sweetly at me. "You're back, Mom. How was the visit with your cousin?" That smile, which I had once found warm, now made me shudder. It was too perfect, too measured like a mask without cracks. I nodded and answered briefly. "Everything was fine, thank you." I had to wait until Clara fell asleep, until Charles returned from the bakery, until I found the moment to speak to my son alone. I sat in the living room, a cup of cold tea in my hands, trying to sort through the chaos of my thoughts. The image of Lucy in front of the broken mirror, her trembling voice, and Mrs. Ellen's story mixed in my mind like a whirlwind pulling me to the center. I had to talk to Charles, but how could I make him believe me? How could I destroy my son's faith in the woman he loved without destroying our family at the same time? That night, that was our place, the space that had always been for mother and son, where he did his homework as a child, where I taught him to knead and roll out the dough. Now, under the dim light, Charles looked tired, but there was a slight satisfaction on his face as he looked at the numbers in order. I closed the kitchen door. The dry click of the lock was like a declaration. This conversation could not be interrupted. "Charles, I need to talk to you." I began, my voice calm but firm, though my heart was pounding. Charles looked up and smiled slightly. "What's wrong, Mom?" I told him that James wanted a divorce and custody of Clara because he feared Lucy was not mentally well. And I recounted that fatal night, the crash, the silence afterward, and how no one in the neighborhood had believed it was an accident. Charles listened, but his expression slowly changed. First it was surprise, then doubt. "Mom, that's just neighborly gossip," he said, his tone somewhat annoyed. "You know how they are, they love to make up stories." I looked him directly in the eye, trying to keep my voice steady. "Charles, the other night I heard Lucy in the bathroom. She said, 'He fell,' as if trying to convince herself. Don't you understand?" The conviction in my voice finally shook him. He sank into the chair, put his hands to his head, and murmured, "What are you talking about, Mom? It can't be. Lucy. No, she couldn't." But before he finished the sentence, the kitchen door opened. Lucy was standing there, a glass of water in her hand, her eyes wide, filled with tears. No one knew how long she had been listening, but that look was enough for me to understand she had heard enough. "You believe her too. Your mother," her voice broke, trembling. "You also think I'm a murderer." The glass in her hands trembled and fell to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Water splashed across the tiles, and the crash made us both jump. Lucy began to cry, not with sadness, but with the desperate wail of someone completely falling apart. "Nobody believes me," she screamed, her voice broken. "Not even you, Charles. You don't trust me either." She covered her face with her hands, shaking as if all the strength she had pretended to have for so long was crumbling in that instant. Charles, bewildered and frightened by his wife's reaction, jumped up and ran to hug her. No, Lucy, I didn't mean that," he said anxiously. "Calm down, my love. Of course I believe you." He held her carefully, stroking her back with a panicked expression, as if he feared she would break, just like the glass on the floor. I remained motionless, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Charles led her toward the bedroom, but before leaving, Lucy turned to look at me. The tears were still streaming down her face, but in her eyes I saw something icy, full of hatred. That look needed no words. It was a silent threat. "You destroyed everything. This is war." From the next day on, the house became a divided territory. Lucy forbade me from getting close to Clara. "I think it will be better if I take Clara to and from school myself," she told me one morning, her voice sweet but cutting. "You have a lot of work at the bakery. I don't want to give you any more worries." I wanted to protest, but Charles's exhausted, pleading look forced me to stay silent. At home, Clara's bedroom door remained closed, and I could only see her in small glimpses as she passed silently through the living room, her head down. Dinners became unbearably silent. Charles tried to make conversation telling anecdotes about a funny customer or some news from the paper, but his voice sounded forced, as if trying to cover the abyss opening up between Lucy and me with words. We didn't exchange words, only glances as sharp as knives. In Lucy's eyes, I no longer saw my daughter-in-law or the woman I once welcomed into this family. Now I saw someone who considered me her enemy, the greatest threat to the secret and the life she had built. At midnight, a strange noise woke me up. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing, my bare feet hitting the cold floor. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to hear better. Lucy's voice resonated low but insistent. "Quick, Clara, put on your coat. We're going on an adventure like princesses in the stories." Then I heard Clara's voice, small but full of fear and resistance. "I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay with Grandma and Daddy Charles. Mommy, let me go." Her heartbreaking scream was like a knife stabbing my heart. Without thinking, I ran out of my room barefoot down the dark hallway. The front door was wide open. The cold sea wind blew in, carrying the salty smell. I ran to the balcony and looked down at the deserted coastal road, lit only by a few yellow streetlights. Under that dim light, I saw Charles's van, the one he used for bread deliveries, with the engine running. Lucy was pushing Clara into the back seat. The girl was resisting her small hands, trying to push her away. Her cry was muffled when the vehicle door slammed shut. The engine roared, and the car sped off into the darkness. The red taillights blinked like two furious eyes before disappearing around the bend at the end of the road. I stood there paralyzed, feeling the ground open up beneath my feet. Without thinking, I ran to Charles's room and pounded on the door. "Wake up! Lucy took Clara. She took your van." Charles sat up, startled, still half asleep, but when he saw my expression, he jumped up immediately. "What are you saying, Mom? Where did she take her?" he asked, his voice alarmed. I told him everything I had seen, trembling but resolute. Panic flashed across his face. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and checked an app. "The GPS. I have the tracker in the van," he shouted, a flicker of hope in his eyes. On the screen, a red dot was moving rapidly north. On the highway, Charles called the police to report a kidnapping. His voice trembled between fear and rage. "They say they'll block the exits," he muttered, but we both knew we couldn't just wait. I gripped the door handle, my eyes fixed on the red dot on the phone. The road was long and dark. Only our car's headlights cut through the night. The sea roared outside and the wind whistled through the slightly open window. Charles didn't say a word. His hands gripped the steering wheel, his eyes red as if fighting the thoughts devouring him from within. After almost an hour, the red dot stopped in an isolated area by the sea. A patrol car also arrived, its headlights illuminating the whole place. Charles's van was there, doors open, but empty. Further ahead on the sand by the water, I saw a figure. It was Lucy. She was holding Clara against her chest. The girl's body was shaking. In the faint moonlight, I saw Clara trying to break free, but Lucy's arms held her like a vice. Lucy was crying and screaming at us when she saw the lights. "Don't come any closer. I won't let you take my daughter from me." She didn't look like a mother protecting her child, but a desperate cornered bird willing to break her own wings to keep what she loved most. The girl's tears. The police began to approach slowly. One of them took a megaphone and spoke in a firm but calm tone. "Mrs. Ramirez, please let her go. No one wants to hurt you or the child. We just want to talk." But Lucy shook her head, hugging Clara tighter, backing toward the water's edge. "You don't understand," she screamed, her voice shattered. "Clara is all I have. I can't lose her." I felt my heart break as I looked at Clara. She looked up at me, her eyes full of tears, and mouthed the word Grandma. I wanted to run and snatch her from Lucy's arms, but Charles held me back, whispering, "Mom, let the police handle this. I'm begging you." His voice was trembling. I stood motionless, tears streaming uncontrollably. I had promised to protect Clara, and yet there she was in front of me, out of my reach. A female officer, a young woman with a soft voice, stepped forward, her hands raised, showing she was unarmed. "Lucy, I know you love Clara," she said, her tone serene but firm. "But you're scaring her. Look at her, she needs to be safe." Those words seemed to reach Lucy. She looked at Clara, and for an instant I saw the pain cross her eyes. Slowly her arms loosened, and Clara, like a freed bird, ran toward me. She threw herself into my arms and burst into tears. "Grandma, I was scared," she whispered, her little body trembling as I hugged her. Lucy didn't resist. She just stood still, watching Clara with mute desperation. Charles, a few feet away, his face pale, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Lucy," he murmured, not daring to approach. I pressed Clara against me, feeling relief and sadness at the same time. Clara was safe, but our family was already broken. After that night, Lucy was transferred to the psychiatric hospital in Gainesville by order of the authorities and with Charles's consent. Clara came home with us. From that day on, the seaside bakery was enveloped in a strange silence. The smell of fresh bread still filled the air each morning, but it no longer brought. Charles worked restlessly from dawn until late at night, as if kneading and delivering bread was the only way to escape the pain. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the shelves, the phone rang. It was a nurse from the psychiatric hospital in Gainesville. Her voice was soft but professional. "Mrs. Torres, Mrs. Ramirez's condition has improved. She has started talking and she wants to see you and Mr. Charles." I stood motionless, gripping the rag in my hands. See Lucy. After everything that had happened, a part of me wanted to refuse, to leave it all behind. The road wound through dry hills until we reached the hospital situated on a green hill. The white walls and well-kept gardens gave a strange sense of peace, completely opposite to the chaos inside me. I took Charles's hand as we entered, feeling it tremble. He said nothing, but his gaze, full of pain and confusion, said it all. We were taken to a common room with large windows overlooking the Sierra Madre Mountains. And there by the window was Lucy. She had changed. She no longer had the shiny black hair or the elegant silk outfits. She was sitting looking outside with a lost expression. When we entered, she didn't turn around right away. Charles spoke first, his voice hoarse. "Lucy, we came to see you." I heard the pain in his tone, as if every word weighed a ton. Lucy started slightly and looked at us. Her eyes no longer had that cold hatred I remembered, only a deep, infinite sadness. She nodded and motioned for us to sit. Silence filled the room, broken only by the wind coming through the window. Then she began to speak, her voice trembling and weak, as if the words had been trapped inside her for years. "My mother left me on the doorstep of an orphanage," she began, her gaze fixed. Text missing, on her lap. "Just before, during a fight, he yelled at her that she didn't deserve to be a mother." I listened, my heart aching. Lucy told us how she grew up in the orphanage, forced to pretend she had a happy life so she wouldn't feel excluded. "I learned to smile to make people like me," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was always afraid they would abandon me, that they would see me as a person without origins, worthless." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the perfect woman with the flawless smile, but a scared child trying to hide her pain under a bright mask. "Then I met James," she continued, her voice softer. "He was 10 years older, a successful businessman. He made me feel safe, gave me the chance to have the perfect family I never had. But that perfection crumbled when James discovered her past. He began to notice her need for control over Clara, how she watched every movement, how she couldn't tolerate a single mistake. He wanted a divorce," Lucy said, and tears began to fall down her cheeks. "He said he would keep Clara, that I was unfit to be a mother." That phrase, she said, was like a knife straight to the heart. "That night we argued. James yelled the same thing my father told my mother. 'A woman like you doesn't deserve to be a mother.' Those words were like a switch." Her voice broke. She covered her face with her hands, shaking. "I lost control. I just wanted him to shut up." She stopped. She took a deep breath, as if gathering strength to continue. "We struggled at the top of the stairs. I pushed his hand off me. He lost his balance and fell. I just heard a thud. Then silence." She broke down crying, her hands clenched together. I panicked. I pretended it was an accident. When the police believed me, I thought I could keep Clara start over. Lucy looked up and stared at me, her eyes full of pain. Ever since then, I lived in fear. I was afraid she would tell you I wasn't a good mother. I was afraid of losing her. The room fell silent. Only Lucy's soft sobs could be heard. Charles moved closer, knelt beside her and hugged her. "Nobody wants to abandon you, Lucy," he said, his voice choked, tears sliding down his face. I'm sorry I didn't understand." I stood there motionless, unable to move. For the first time, I didn't see a monster. I didn't see the woman with the fake smile and the terrifying red shoes. I saw a broken human being, a soul full of scars, clumsily hidden behind a facade of perfection. Several months passed. Lucy was transferred to a more specialized treatment center far from Key West, where doctors said she would need a long time to heal the deep wounds in her mind. I don't know if she will ever be the same, but I hold out hope, however small, that she finds the peace she lost so long ago. Life in Key West little by little returned to its rhythm. My bakery continued to open every day. The aroma of baked bread and coffee still filled the air, reminding me that no matter what happens, life goes on. I get up every morning, knead bake, and receive the smiles of the regular customers. Her clear laughter now fills the silent corners of the bakery, like cheerful notes in a sad melody. One sun-drenched afternoon, I was behind the counter teaching Clara how to sprinkle powdered sugar on the freshly baked donuts. She was wearing an oversized apron and carefully using a star-shaped paper stencil to decorate the pastries. "Look, Grandma, how pretty!" she exclaimed, her eyes shining as the sugar grains fell, forming a bright star. I smiled, unable to contain my joy at seeing her so full of life. "It's beautiful, my princess," I told her. He occasionally looked up and smiled at Clara. The worry lines on his forehead had softened, though I knew the pain was still there, hidden under an apparent calm. He spoke little of Lucy, but he still wore his wedding ring, like a reminder of the love he once felt for her. Watching him with Clara, I felt some comfort. Our family, though fractured, was still finding a way to rebuild day by day. Suddenly, Clara stopped her hands, the stencil suspended over the bread. She looked at me with clear eyes, but with a certain doubt. "Grandma," she asked in a low voice, as if afraid of breaking something fragile, "is Mommy going to come back?" That question was like a needle. A little white flower smudged her cheek, and I wiped it away tenderly before smiling gently at her. "Of course, my love. Your mom is in a special place, learning to live peacefully and happily. Just like when you learn to read a difficult book, she needs time too." Clara nodded, though her gaze was still full of doubt. I hugged her, feeling her small, warm body against mine. "Someday, when your mom has finished her lessons, she'll come back," I whispered, though even I didn't know if it was true or just a way to comfort her. She didn't answer, but she snuggled tighter in my arms, trusting me. In that instant, I knew that. Text missing. I had to. That night. After closing the bakery, I walked alone on Mariner's Beach. The sunset stained the sea in shades of orange and violet. The waves gently hit the shore with that eternal sound that seems to tell the story of time. I took off my sandals and felt the cold sand under my feet walking by the water. The sea breeze blew, bringing the salty smell and a feeling of freedom I hadn't experienced in a long time. I picked up a smooth stone from the sand, polished by years and tides. I threw it into the sea, watching it skip on the water before sinking. "Nobody can live in the past forever," I murmured to myself. Sometimes letting go is the only way to keep what is most beautiful. I looked back at the bakery, where the yellow light still shone where Clara and Charles were waiting for me. Although this path had been painful, I knew my family was still there, imperfect, but strong enough to keep going. There are wounds that are not seen that live in memory, in fear, in that need to control everything, just so you don't lose again. After everything I've lived through, I understood that what we call perfection is often just a mask that hides the deepest pain. Lucy was not a villain. She was a woman suffocated by her past, incapable of loving the right way. Life, despite the losses, goes on, and if there is one lesson I want to leave, it is this. Listen to those you love before it's too late, because sometimes what they need is not judgment, but a hug warm enough for the fear to dissolve. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identity of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I sincerely wonder if you were in my place. What would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace, or would you face everything to get your voice back? I want to know your opinion because every story can become a candle that lights the way for someone else. May God bless you, and I am sure that courage always leads us to better days. Now on the end screen, I will leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you.